"Get out!" shouted the young CEO, but the single father replied, "I'll buy them all." The November sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of Ashford Luxury Motors, Charlotte's most exclusive Mercedes dealership. Ravenna Ashford stood on the second-floor balcony of her glass-walled office, surveying her domain with the satisfaction of a queen overlooking her kingdom. At 27, she had built an empire worth $890 million through 15 dealerships across 3 states. Her royal blue Armani blazer, one of 12 identical ones in her closet, fit perfectly over a crisp white Hermès blouse. Her ice-blonde hair fell in a sleek curtain past her shoulders, and her Louboutin heels clicked with authority on the imported Italian tile. Below, the showroom gleamed like a jewelry box. 6 Mercedes vehicles sat under precision lighting, each positioned to catch the eye and quicken the pulse. The crown jewel was a champagne-colored Maybach S-Class, priced at $185,000, positioned center stage like a diamond in a Tiffany window. Ravenna's phone buzzed, another investor wanting to discuss her expansion into Florida. She silenced it without looking. Money called to money, and Ravenna Ashford never missed a call that mattered. But right now, she was watching something that definitely didn't matter, a battered Ford pickup truck pulling into her parking lot, sputtering like it was taking its last breath. "Marcus," she said into her desk phone, her voice sharp as cut glass, "we have wanderers. Handle it before they touch anything." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Ravenna watched a man emerge from the truck. He wore faded jeans, work boots, covered in dried mud, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, probably in a different decade. But it was what happened next that made Ravenna's perfectly shaped eyebrow arch with disdain. The passenger door opened, and a little girl hopped out. 7 years old, maybe 8, with dark braids and a bright yellow backpack covered in unicorn stickers. She grabbed her father's hand, and even from her elevated position, Ravenna could see the wonder in the child's eyes as she gazed at the gleaming vehicles through the showroom windows. "Daddy, look at all the pretty cars." The child's voice carried through the glass as they approached the entrance. Ravenna pressed the intercom again. "Marcus, I said handle it, now." Marcus Thompson, her top sales manager, moved toward the entrance with the practiced smile of someone about to deliver bad news gently. But Ravenna didn't feel like being gentle today. She'd just closed a deal that put her $47 million ahead of her projected quarterly earnings. She was untouchable. The father and daughter entered, and Ravenna watched the little girl's face light up like Christmas morning. The child pressed her small hand against the window of the Maybach, leaving a fingerprint on glass that Ravenna had paid someone $200 that morning to make spotless. "Don't touch, sweetheart," the father said softly, gently pulling his daughter's hand back. "We're just looking." "But Daddy, it's so beautiful," the girl breathed, her nose nearly pressed against the window. "It's like a princess car." Something about the tenderness in the man's voice made Ravenna pause. She watched him crouch down to his daughter's level, his calloused hands gently framing her small face. "You like this one, Emma?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion Ravenna couldn't quite identify. "I love it, Daddy," Emma said, her eyes huge and brown and trusting. "When you get your big job, can we get a car like this? Just like you said." The man's expression softened with something that looked almost like pain. "I promised you, didn't I, Princess? When Daddy's invention comes through, we'll come back here and get whatever car you want." Ravenna felt something twist uncomfortably in her chest, an emotion she quickly identified and dismissed as indigestion from her $45 organic lunch. This was exactly the kind of irresponsible parenting that disgusted her. Making promises you couldn't keep, filling a child's head with impossible dreams, teaching them that wishing made things real. Marcus had reached them now, his professional smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you find something? Perhaps in our pre-owned lot next door." The subtle insult hung in the air. Pre-owned, used, for people who couldn't afford new. The father stood, maintaining his dignity despite the obvious dismissal. "We were interested in the S-Class line, just looking at options for the future." The future. Marcus's smile didn't waver, but his eyes said everything his mouth didn't. I see. Well, our S-Class models start at $115,000, and financing requirements are quite substantial. Credit check, proof of income, 20% down. I understand the requirements, the father said quietly. There was something in his voice, something educated and articulate that didn't match his appearance at all. That's when Ravenna made her decision. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was the quarterly success going to her head. Perhaps it was the way the little girl looked at her father with such complete trust. Perhaps it was simply because she could. But Ravenna descended from her office like an avenging angel. Her heels announced her arrival before her voice did. Every head in the showroom turned. When Ravenna Ashford left her office, someone was about to be fired or humiliated, sometimes both. "Marcus, is there a problem?" Her voice cut through the showroom's classical music like a knife through silk. "No problem at all, Ms. Ashford," Marcus replied, relief evident in his voice. "Just directing these folks to more appropriate options." Ravenna approached, her cold blue eyes taking in every detail of the father and daughter. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in the man's face, the way his clothes, though clean, were worn thin at the elbows. She could smell honest work, sawdust and motor oil, so different from the expensive colognes her usual clients wore. The little girl clutched her father's hand tighter, her earlier joy replaced by confusion and the beginning of fear. "So," Ravenna said, her voice loud enough for everyone in the showroom to hear. She wanted witnesses. She wanted this moment documented in the minds of everyone present. "You promised your daughter a Mercedes. How touching, how noble." She paused, letting the sarcasm drip from every word like poison from a snake's fangs. "Let me educate you about promises, sir. They require the ability to keep them. This vehicle," she gestured dismissively at the Maybach, "costs $185,000. That doesn't include tax, title, registration, or insurance, which for someone in your situation would be astronomical. So unless you have that kind of money tucked into those work boots, you're teaching your daughter a very dangerous lesson about living in fantasy land." The showroom had gone silent. Even the classical music seemed to fade into nothing. The father's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. His jaw clenched, and Ravenna watched him fight for control. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried weight. "You don't know anything about me or my situation." "I know plenty," Ravenna countered, crossing her arms over her royal blue blazer. "I know you drove here in a truck that's one breakdown away from the junkyard. I know those boots have 6 months of construction site mud on them. I know that jacket was probably bought at a discount store 5 years ago. And I know that you're filling your daughter's head with impossible dreams because you can't face the reality of your own limitations." "Ms. Ashford," Marcus interjected quietly, clearly uncomfortable with how far his boss was taking this. But Ravenna silenced him with a look. She was on a roll now, and something dark and cruel had taken over. Maybe it was the way the little girl looked at her father with such complete faith. Maybe it was the memory of her own father's broken promises. Maybe she was just tired of people who didn't understand their place in the world. The little girl, Emma, had been silent throughout this exchange, her brown eyes moving between her father and Ravenna like she was watching a tennis match. Tears had started streaming down her cheeks, but she made no sound. She simply watched, her small backpack clutched to her chest. Then something shifted in the child's expression. The tears stopped, her small jaw set with determination that seemed far too mature for a 7-year-old. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of her father, and looked directly up at Ravenna with eyes that suddenly reminded the CEO uncomfortably of someone else, someone from a past she'd buried deep. "My daddy," Emma said, her voice small but steady, "is the smartest man in the whole world, and he's the kindest, and he's the best father anyone could ever have." Ravenna opened her mouth to speak, but Emma wasn't finished. "He works really, really hard every day, even when his back hurts and he's tired. He makes me breakfast every morning and braids my hair, even though he's not very good at it. He helps me with my homework and reads to me every night and never, ever lies to me. The child's voice grew stronger, carrying through the silent showroom. And you know what else? My daddy told me that rich people are supposed to be nice, that when you have a lot, you're supposed to help people who have less. He said that's what good people do. But you have all these pretty cars and this big building and you're the meanest person I've ever met. So maybe having money just makes people mean and ugly inside. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Ravenna felt as if she'd been slapped. Around the showroom, she could sense the shock, the barely suppressed reactions of her staff. No one spoke to Ravenna Ashford like that. No one. But it was what happened next that no one in that showroom would ever forget. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope worn at the edges. With careful, deliberate movements, she opened it and removed a $20 bill, folded and refolded so many times it was soft as cloth. "This is my birthday money from my grandma," Emma said, holding it out toward Ravenna with a trembling hand. "It's all I have. But if it'll make you be nice to my daddy, if it'll make you stop saying mean things, you can have it. Please, just be kind. That's all we want. Just kindness." Ravenna stared at the $20 bill. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. The little girl's hand remained extended, her brown eyes searching Ravenna's face for some sign of humanity, some indication that her sacrifice would matter. And in that moment, with every eye in the dealership watching, Ravenna Ashford realized she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. She just didn't know how big. Not yet. 3 months had passed since that devastating day at Ashford Luxury Motors, and the father, who'd been humiliated in front of his daughter, had disappeared from Ravenna's mind almost immediately. She had bigger concerns. The Florida expansion was moving forward, her net worth had crossed $900 million, and she'd just been featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue. But across town, in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, Daniel Reed sat at a kitchen table covered in papers and prototype sketches, his 7-year-old daughter asleep in the only bedroom. He worked under a single lamp, the kind of focused intensity that had earned him a master's degree in mechanical engineering from MIT before life had derailed his career plans. Emma's baby monitor sat on the table, even though she was too old for it. Daniel couldn't help himself. After losing his wife Sarah 3 years ago to a sudden aneurysm, he lived in constant, low-grade terror that Emma would somehow slip away too. "Just a few more hours," he whispered to himself, adjusting the lens on his latest prototype. "Just a few more hours and we'll know." The invention that consumed Daniel's every waking moment was deceptively simple, an electromagnetic lens system that could revolutionize medical imaging. Where current MRI machines cost hospitals $3 million and required dedicated rooms with special shielding, Daniel's system could be portable, cost $200,000, and produce images 3 times clearer than anything currently available. The night Ravenna had humiliated them, Daniel had been on his way to celebrate with Emma. He'd just received word that his patent application had been approved. His prototype worked. Now he just needed someone to believe in it enough to invest. That someone had turned out to be Dr. Patricia Chen, Chief of Radiology at Charlotte Memorial Hospital. She'd seen Daniel's presentation at a medical technology conference and immediately understood what he'd created. "This will save lives," she'd said simply. "Millions of lives. How much do you need?" Now, 3 months later, Daniel's invention had attracted $15 million in initial investment. Chen Medical Technologies, named after his champion, had 3 hospitals lined up for pilot programs, and the latest projection put the company's 5-year value at $200 million, with Daniel owning 40% of the shares. He should have felt triumphant. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt tired and sad and oddly empty. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her dark braids mussed from sleep. "Daddy, you said you'd come to bed 2 hours ago?" Daniel checked his watch. 2:47 a.m. Guilt washed over him. "I'm sorry, Princess. I got caught up in your work, I know. Emma padded across the cold linoleum in her unicorn pajamas. Is it the invention that's going to make us rich? It's the invention that's going to give us security, Daniel corrected gently, pulling her onto his lap. There's a difference, sweetheart. Will we have enough money to buy the princess car? Emma asked, and Daniel felt his heart clench. That damn car, that damn promise. He'd tried to let it go, tried to convince himself that Emma had forgotten about it in the wake of exciting news about his invention's success. But Emma was her mother's daughter. She remembered everything, especially promises. Yes, Daniel said quietly. Yes, we will. And we'll go back to that mean lady's store. Emma's voice held no malice, only curiosity. Daniel stroked her braids, the way Sarah used to do. Would you want to? After what happened? Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking with the seriousness she'd developed since her mother's death. That particular gravity that settled on children forced to grow up too fast. Mommy used to say that being kind to mean people is the bravest thing you can do, Emma finally said. She said hurt people, and the only way to break the cycle is to show them something different. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. His brilliant, empathetic 7-year-old, teaching him lessons he'd somehow forgotten. You know what, Emma? You're right. When the time comes, we'll go back, not for revenge, not to show off, but to show that woman what real success looks like. And it's not about the money. Emma nodded, satisfied, and snuggled against her father's chest. Within minutes, she was asleep again, breathing softly against his shoulder. Daniel carried her back to bed, tucking her in with the threadbare quilt Sarah's grandmother had made. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, feeling the weight of every promise he'd ever made to her. Tomorrow, Dr. Chen wanted to meet about accelerating the production timeline. Next week, he had meetings with hospital administrators in 3 different states. In 1 month, the first Chen Medical Technologies imaging system would be installed at Charlotte Memorial. And in 3 months, if everything went according to plan, Daniel Reed would have enough money to walk back into Ashford Luxury Motors and keep the promise he'd made to his daughter. But he had no idea that keeping that promise would set in motion events that would change all of their lives forever. Back at Ashford Luxury Motors, Ravenna was having one of her regular late-night inspections. She prowled through the showroom at 10 p.m. after her staff had gone home, looking for any detail out of place. It was during one of these inspections that she found it, a small handwritten note tucked under the windshield wiper of the Champagne Maybach. The paper was worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. The handwriting was a child's, careful and deliberate. Dear Princess Car, my daddy says we'll come back for you someday. When we do, I hope you're still here. I hope the mean lady learns to be nice by then. My mommy says everyone has good inside them, even people who forgot how to show it. Love, Emma. Ravenna stared at the note for a full minute. Then, with movements sharp and angry, she crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. But 3 hours later, at 1 a.m., she found herself digging it back out, smoothing the wrinkles, reading it again by the light of her desk lamp. Everyone has good inside them, even people who forgot how to show it. Ravenna laughed bitterly. That little girl had no idea how wrong she was. Some people didn't forget how to show their good. They never had any to begin with. Ravenna had learned that lesson from her own father, a man who'd measured love in dollar signs and approval in quarterly earnings. She tucked the note into her desk drawer, telling herself she was keeping it as a reminder of why she maintained such high standards. The weak and sentimental had no place in business. That father and his daughter had been a distraction, nothing more. But as she drove home to her empty penthouse that night, Ravenna couldn't shake the image of that little girl's face, the trust in her eyes when she looked at her father, the brave determination when she'd offered her birthday money, the gentle sadness when she'd suggested that maybe rich people could choose to be kind. Ravenna had built her empire on being hard, on being ruthless, on being untouchable. She'd never let sentiment or softness interfere with business. She'd learned from her father's example. Emotion was weakness, and weakness was fatal in the world of high-stakes commerce. But somewhere deep inside, buried under layers of designer clothes and practiced cruelty, something uncomfortably like shame had taken root. Ravenna Ashford crushed it ruthlessly, the way she crushed everything that threatened her carefully constructed world. She had no idea that in 3 months that shame would bloom into something she couldn't control, couldn't crush, couldn't escape. Because sometimes the universe has a way of forcing us to face exactly what we've been running from. And Ravenna Ashford's reckoning was already in motion. The quarterly investors' meeting was supposed to be Ravenna's moment of triumph. She stood before 15 of Charlotte's most powerful business leaders, presenting her expansion plans with the polished confidence that had made her legendary. Her royal blue blazer was impeccable. Her presentation was flawless. The numbers spoke for themselves. $890 million net worth, 15 dealerships, 27% year-over-year growth. But halfway through her presentation, Jonathan Mills, her youngest board member and the one person on the board she actually respected, interrupted her. "Ravenna, before we vote on the Florida expansion, I think we need to address something that's been brought to my attention." Ravenna felt a flicker of annoyance. Jonathan was 42, a self-made millionaire who'd started with nothing and built a chain of luxury hotels. Unlike the other board members, most of whom had inherited their wealth, Jonathan had fought for every dollar. That's why Ravenna tolerated his occasional challenges to her authority. "What concern, Jonathan?" Ravenna asked, her voice cool but professional. Jonathan pulled out his tablet and turned it toward the room. "This video has been circulating on social media for the past 2 weeks. It's from your main showroom, November 15th. I think everyone should see it before we move forward." Ravenna's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what video he meant. On the tablet screen, crystal clear and properly edited for maximum emotional impact, was the encounter with Daniel and Emma. Someone had captured it on their phone, probably one of the other customers in the showroom that day. The video showed everything: Ravenna's cruel words, Emma's brave defense of her father, the $20 bill offered with trembling hands. But what made Ravenna's stomach drop was the view count. 2, 3 million. And the comments, thousands upon thousands of comments, each one more damning than the last. "This is what's wrong with the wealthy elite. That little girl showed more class than this CEO ever will. Boycott Ashford Motors. Make this woman pay. Someone find that father and daughter. Let's show them what real kindness looks like." The conference room was silent as the video played. Ravenna watched her fellow board members' expressions shift from curiosity to discomfort to outright disgust. When the video ended, Jonathan spoke quietly. "Ravenna, you're brilliant at business. You've built something remarkable. But this isn't business. This is cruelty. And it's costing us." "Costing us?" Ravenna's voice was sharp. "7 major clients have pulled their contracts in the past week," Jonathan continued. "The Mercedes corporate office has called twice asking for explanations, and 3 of our best salespeople have resigned, citing ethical concerns about continuing to work for Ashford Motors." Margaret Davidson, the oldest board member and Ravenna's most consistent supporter, leaned forward. "My granddaughter saw this video, Ravenna. She's 7 years old. She asked me why rich people are so mean to poor people. What was I supposed to tell her?" Ravenna felt the walls closing in. This is a business meeting about expansion plans, not a moral discussion about a single customer interaction. "It's not just one interaction," Jonathan interrupted. "I've been doing some research since this video surfaced. There are dozens of complaints filed against Ashford Motors for discriminatory practices. People refuse service because they don't look like they can afford our vehicles. Families turned away at the door because their clothes aren't expensive enough. We maintain standards," Ravenna said coldly. "We cater to a specific clientele." "We discriminate," Jonathan corrected, "and the world is watching now. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ravenna looked around the room at 15 faces that had once looked at her with respect and admiration. Now they looked at her with disappointment, with judgment, with the kind of moral superiority that made her want to scream. "I will not apologize for maintaining excellence," Ravenna said firmly. "If a few sensitive people can't handle reality, that's not my problem. Then you leave us no choice." Jonathan stood, gathering his papers. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence. Ravenna Ashford is brilliant, but she's become a liability to this company. I propose we remove her as CEO and install someone who can rebuild our reputation while maintaining profitability." The motion was seconded. The vote was called. Ravenna watched in stunned silence as one by one hands rose in favor of removing her from the company she'd built from nothing. 15 hands, unanimous. "This meeting is adjourned," Margaret said sadly. "Ravenna, you have until end of business Friday to clear your office. We'll negotiate a severance package that's fair, but your tenure as CEO is over." Ravenna drove home in a daze, barely seeing the road. Her phone buzzed constantly. News outlets wanting comments, former employees calling to gloat, social media notifications piling up faster than she could process them. When she finally reached her penthouse, she poured herself a glass of wine that cost more than most people made in a week and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city she'd once felt she owned. Her phone rang. Her father. Ravenna almost didn't answer. "I saw the video," Richard Ashford said without preamble. "This is exactly what I warned you about, Ravenna. Emotion makes you weak. You let that man and his brat get under your skin, and now you've lost everything." "I didn't lose," Ravenna started, but her father cut her off. "You're not CEO anymore. You're not anything. You let your pride destroy what I helped you build. You're just like your mother, too soft, too emotional, too weak to do what's necessary." The comparison to her mother, dead from a broken heart after her father's affairs and cruelty, made something snap inside Ravenna. "No," she said quietly. "I'm exactly like you, Dad. And that's the problem." She hung up before he could respond. For the first time in years, Ravenna Ashford cried, not delicate tears that could be quickly wiped away, but deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the empire she'd lost. She cried for the person she'd become. She cried for the little girl with the $20 bill who'd seen through her so completely. And she cried because somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrible thought was growing. What if Emma had been right? What if having money had made her mean and ugly inside? 3 months from now, Daniel Reed would walk back into her dealership. 3 months from now, Ravenna would face the man she'd humiliated and the daughter she'd made cry. 3 months from now, everything would change. But tonight, in her empty penthouse with her empty wine glass, Ravenna Ashford was just a 27-year-old woman who'd built an empire on ice and cruelty and was now watching it all melt away. She pulled Emma's note from her purse. She'd been carrying it since finding it, though she couldn't explain why, and read it again. Everyone has good inside them, even people who forgot how to show it. Maybe Emma was right, but Ravenna had no idea how to find that good again, or if it had ever existed in the first place. 6 months after the video destroyed her career, Ravenna Ashford sat in a coffee shop she would never have entered before, the kind with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu where a latte cost $3, 50 towels instead of $12. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a simple sweater from Target that had cost $99. The severance package had been generous, $2 million. But after paying off debts and legal fees from former employees who'd sued for discrimination, Ravenna had about $600,000 left, enough to live comfortably, but not lavishly, not the way she'd become accustomed to. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Patricia Chen, someone Ravenna had met at a charity function 3 years ago and had barely remembered until Patricia reached out after seeing the viral video. "Coffee still on for today? I have a proposition for you." Ravenna typed back, "I'm here, corner table." 9. When Patricia arrived 15 minutes later, she carried a worn leather messenger bag and had the distracted look of someone who spent more time thinking about science than fashion. She was 52, brilliant, and had the kind of quiet confidence that came from saving lives rather than making money. "Ravenna," Patricia said, sliding into the seat across from her, "you look different. Better, actually." "I look poor," Ravenna said flatly. "Let's not pretend otherwise." Patricia smiled. "You look human. There's a difference." She pulled out her tablet. "I have a business proposition for you, but first, I need to know something. Have you seen this?" She turned the screen toward Ravenna. It was a news article dated 2 days ago. "Revolutionary medical imaging system saves first life. 7-year-old girl's brain tumor detected early, thanks to new technology." Below the headline was a photo that made Ravenna's breath catch. Daniel Reed, older, more confident, wearing a proper suit, standing next to Dr. Chen and a hospital administrator. And beside him, smiling brightly, was Emma, holding a certificate that declared her father Charlotte's medical innovation hero. "That's—" Ravenna couldn't finish the sentence. "Daniel Reed," Patricia confirmed. "The man you humiliated 6 months ago. He invented a portable MRI system that's going to revolutionize emergency medicine. His company, Chen Medical Technologies, is now valued at $180 million. Daniel owns 40% of it." Ravenna felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. The poor man she'd dismissed, the father she'd mocked for making promises he supposedly couldn't keep, was worth $72 million, more than she'd ever had, even at her peak. "Why are you showing me this?" Ravenna asked, her voice hollow. "Because Daniel's success has created opportunities," Patricia said. "We need someone to manage the business side of Chen Medical Technologies. Someone who understands luxury markets, investor relations, and high-stakes negotiations. Someone brilliant at business, but who's learned some hard lessons about humanity." Ravenna stared at her. "You want me to work for him? For the man I want you to work with him," Patricia corrected, "as COO of Chen Medical Technologies. Daniel's brilliant with the technical side, but he's drowning in business meetings and investor calls. He needs someone who can handle that side so he can focus on innovation." "He'll never agree to this," Ravenna said. "Not after what I did." Patricia leaned back, studying Ravenna carefully. "Daniel Reed is the most forgiving person I've ever met. He spent the last 6 months building something that will save lives. But he's also spent every night reading bedtime stories to his daughter and teaching her that people deserve second chances, even people who hurt us." "That sounds like Emma talking, not him," Ravenna said quietly. "Emma is very much her father's daughter," Patricia agreed. "And yes, she's the one who suggested we reach out to you. She saw your interview." "What interview?" Patricia pulled up another video on her tablet. It was from a local news segment Ravenna had done 2 weeks ago, her first public appearance since the scandal. The interviewer had asked what she'd learned from being cancelled. On screen, Ravenna watched herself speak. "I learned that success without compassion isn't success at all. It's just accumulation. I built an empire, but I forgot to build a life worth living. I forgot that people matter more than profit margins, and I forgot that the way we treat others, especially those who can't benefit us, is the truest measure of who we are." "Emma watched that 3 times, Patricia said. Then she told her father, "Daddy, I think the mean lady learned her lesson. Maybe we should help her, like you always help people." Ravenna felt tears threatening. That little girl, after everything, wanted to help her. "Daniel's not convinced," Patricia continued. "He's protective of Emma and worried about bringing someone into their lives who hurt her so deeply. But he's willing to meet with you. Coffee, neutral territory, no pressure, just a conversation." "When?" Ravenna asked, her voice barely audible. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. He suggested the Starbucks on 5th Street. Patricia smiled. Emma picked it because they have good hot chocolate. The next afternoon, Ravenna arrived 15 minutes early, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee cup. She'd changed outfits 4 times, finally settling on simple black pants and a grey sweater, professional but not ostentatious. When Daniel walked in with Emma, Ravenna almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the exhausted man in worn flannel. This Daniel wore tailored slacks and a crisp button-down. His hair was professionally cut. He moved with quiet confidence, but his eyes, those same kind, intelligent eyes, still held the weight of single parenthood and loss. Emma spotted Ravenna first. For a moment the little girl froze, her hand tightening on her father's. Then, with the bravery that had humbled Ravenna 6 months ago, Emma walked straight to her table. "Hi," Emma said simply. "You look sad. Are you okay?" Of all the things Ravenna had prepared herself for, anger, accusations, coldness, she hadn't prepared for kindness. Ravenna's voice broke. "Emma, I'm so sorry. For everything I said, for how I treated you and your daddy. You were just a little girl who wanted to dream, and I tried to crush that dream because I was cruel and broken and—" "It's okay," Emma interrupted gently. "Daddy says hurt people hurt people. Were you hurting inside that day?" Ravenna nodded, unable to speak. "Are you still hurting?" "Every day," Ravenna whispered. "Every single day." Emma looked up at her father, who'd been watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. "Daddy, can I have hot chocolate money?" Daniel handed her a $5 bill, and Emma skipped toward the counter, giving the adults privacy. "She's remarkable," Ravenna said, wiping her eyes. "You raised someone truly special." Daniel sat down across from her. "Her mother started that. I'm just trying not to mess it up." He paused. "Patricia told you about the job offer?" "She did. And Daniel, I understand if you can't do this. If having me anywhere near your life is too much after what I did." "What you did was treat us like we were nothing," Daniel interrupted quietly. "You judged us based on appearance, made assumptions about our worth, and humiliated my daughter in front of strangers. That video haunted Emma for weeks. She had nightmares about the mean car lady, telling her she didn't deserve nice things. Ravenna felt like she might be sick. I don't know how to make that right." "You can't," Daniel said bluntly. "You can't undo that damage. But Emma's therapist says that watching people grow and change can be healing. She says Emma needs to see that her words that day, her bravery, actually meant something, that they helped someone become better." "Did they?" Daniel asked, his eyes boring into hers. "Did you actually change, Ravenna? Or are you just better at hiding the cruelty now that it's cost you something?" It was the question Ravenna had been asking herself for 6 months, and finally she had an answer. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I know I want to be different. I know I hate who I was, but wanting to change and actually changing are different things. I'm in therapy. I volunteer at a homeless shelter twice a week. I'm trying to learn empathy like it's a language I never studied, but whether that makes me a different person or just a guilty one, I honestly don't know." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "That's the first completely honest thing I've ever heard you say." Emma returned with her hot chocolate, whipped cream piled high. She settled into the chair next to Ravenna instead of next to her father, a gesture that made both adults freeze. "Did you tell her about your invention, Daddy?" Emma asked, licking whipped cream from her upper lip. "Not yet, sweetheart." "You should. It's really cool." Emma turned to Ravenna with enthusiasm. "Daddy made a machine that helps doctors see inside people's bodies to find sick parts. It saved a little girl named Sophie who had a brain tumor. The doctors found it super early because of Daddy's machine, and now she's going to be okay." "That's incredible," Ravenna said, genuinely awed. "Daniel, that's world-changing." "It's just the beginning," Daniel said, "but managing the business side is overwhelming. I need someone who can handle investor relations, negotiate contracts, manage the financial growth while I focus on refining the technology and developing new applications. Patricia said you're offering me COO? On a trial basis, 6 months. You'd work from our main office, report directly to me, and have no contact with Emma during work hours." Daniel's tone was firm. "If at any point I feel you're falling back into old patterns, or if Emma shows any distress about your presence in our lives, the arrangement ends immediately. No second chances beyond this one." "That's more than fair," Ravenna said. "Daniel, I don't deserve this opportunity." "No, you don't," Daniel agreed. "But Emma believes in second chances, and I trust my daughter's instincts about people more than I trust my own. So we'll try this. And maybe, if you really have changed, you'll help save some lives along the way." Emma had been listening carefully. Now she reached out and took Ravenna's hand with sticky, hot chocolate-covered fingers. "Daddy's invention is going to help so many people," Emma said seriously. "And maybe you being part of it will help you too. Mommy used to say that helping others is the best medicine for a sad heart." Ravenna looked at this remarkable 7-year-old who just offered her redemption wrapped in whipped cream and childish wisdom, and felt something shift in her chest, something that had been frozen for years beginning to thaw. "Thank you, Emma," Ravenna whispered. "I promise I'll do everything I can to deserve this chance." Emma smiled. "I know you will, because mean people who learn to be nice work extra hard to make up for the mean stuff. That's what Daddy says." As they finalized the details, salary, start date, job responsibilities, Ravenna realized something profound. 6 months ago, she'd had $890 million and felt empty. Today, with $600,000 and a job working for the man she'd once humiliated, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, because what happens next will change everything. 3 months into her role as COO of Chen Medical Technologies, Ravenna had transformed the company's business operations. She'd secured contracts with 12 major hospitals, negotiated a distribution deal with a national medical supply company, and attracted $50 million in additional venture capital funding. The company's valuation had jumped to $340 million. But more importantly, Ravenna had begun to transform herself. She arrived at the office at 7 a.m. and left at 6 p.m., reasonable hours that let her actually live rather than just work. She learned the names of the janitors and the administrative staff. She remembered birthdays. She said please and thank you like they were sacred words. And slowly, painfully, she learned what it felt like to be part of something bigger than her own ambition. Daniel watched this transformation with cautious optimism. Ravenna was brilliant at her job, even better than he'd hoped. But he remained guarded, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the real Ravenna to resurface. The test came on a Thursday afternoon in late April. Ravenna was in her office reviewing contracts when Daniel's assistant, Michelle, knocked urgently. "Ms. Ashford, we have a situation. There's a man in the lobby claiming he has a meeting with Mr. Reed, but he's not on the schedule. Security wants to remove him, but he's insisting he has a revolutionary medical device and needs just 10 minutes of Daniel's time." Ravenna's old instincts kicked in immediately. Unscheduled visitors were time wasters, desperate inventors were liabilities, and maintaining professional boundaries was essential. She started to say, "Have security escort him out." But something made her pause. She thought about Daniel arriving at her dealership in his worn flannel, dismissed as unworthy before anyone heard what he had to say. "What does he look like?" Ravenna asked. Michelle hesitated. "He's rough around the edges. Clothes are worn, he's clearly nervous, and he brought his teenage daughter with him. She's in a wheelchair." Ravenna closed her laptop. "I'll handle it." She found the man in the lobby, exactly as Michelle had described, maybe 45 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better days, standing protectively beside a girl of about 15 who sat in a wheelchair, her legs covered by a blanket. The girl had dark circles under her eyes, but a hopeful expression that reminded Ravenna painfully of Emma. "Mr. Ravenna approached with her hand extended. "Rodriguez, Carlos Rodriguez." He shook her hand hesitantly. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but I've been trying to get a meeting for 3 months. My emails go unanswered, my calls get blocked by your secretary. I apologize for that," Ravenna said sincerely. "We've been overwhelmed with volume, but that's no excuse. I'm Ravenna Ashford, COO. Why don't you tell me what brought you here?" Carlos's eyes widened. "You're from the video, the Mercedes dealership?" Ravenna felt her cheeks flush. Even now, 9 months later, that video followed her everywhere. Yes, that was me, at my absolute worst, but I'm trying to be better, so please tell me about your invention. The girl in the wheelchair spoke up, her voice soft but steady. My name is Isabella. I have a degenerative nerve condition. The doctors say I'll be completely paralyzed within 2 years, but my dad invented something that might help people like me. Carlos pulled out a tablet and showed Ravenna a design for a neural interface device, something that could bypass damaged nerves and allow people with paralysis to regain movement through direct brain-to-muscle communication. It's still theoretical, Carlos admitted. I have the engineering background. I used to design surgical instruments before I had to quit to care for Isabella full-time, but I need funding for prototypes, clinical trials, FDA approval. I need someone who believes in impossible things. Ravenna studied the designs. She wasn't an engineer, but she'd learned enough working with Daniel to recognize genuine innovation when she saw it. Wait here, she said. Both of you. I'll be right back. She found Daniel in his lab, tinkering with the latest version of his imaging system. Daniel, I need you to meet someone now. Something in her tone made him put down his tools immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something might be very right, but I need you to trust me. 5 minutes later, Daniel and Carlos were deep in technical discussion while Isabella and Ravenna sat nearby. The girl watched her father with such hope, such desperate faith, that Ravenna felt her heart crack open. He's brilliant, Isabella said quietly. But no one will give him a chance because we don't have the right connections, or the right look, or enough money. I know exactly what that feels like, Ravenna said. Your father walked into a building where people judged him before he opened his mouth. That's how I used to treat people. That's how I treated Daniel and his daughter, Emma. Isabella had clearly seen the video. Emma was really brave that day, standing up to you like that. She was braver than I'd ever been in my entire life, Ravenna agreed. She taught me that real courage isn't about having power. It's about using whatever power you have to choose kindness. After an hour, Daniel emerged from his technical discussion with Carlos, looking energized in a way Ravenna hadn't seen before. This is viable, Daniel said. Raw, needs refinement, but the core concept is sound. Carlos, how much funding do you need for initial prototypes? Realistically, $300,000 for the first phase. Daniel looked at Ravenna. As COO, she controlled the discretionary investment fund they'd established for exactly this kind of opportunity. But $300,000 was a significant risk on an unproven technology from an unknown inventor. Every business instinct Ravenna had developed over her career screamed at her to say no, to minimize risk, to protect their resources. But then she looked at Isabella, at the hope in her eyes. She looked at Carlos, who was trying so hard to maintain dignity despite his desperation, and she looked at Daniel, who was giving her the space to make this call on her own. We'll fund it, Ravenna said. $300,000 for phase 1, with potential for additional funding based on results. Carlos, you'll work directly with our engineering team. We'll provide lab space, equipment, and access to our clinical trial networks. Carlos looked like he might faint. We can't. This is what second chances look like, Ravenna said softly. Someone gave me one when I didn't deserve it. Now I'm paying it forward. Isabella started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come from hope, deferred suddenly becoming real. Dad, you did it. You're going to help people like me. After Carlos and Isabella left, floating on promises and possibility, Daniel turned to Ravenna. That was a big risk, he said. The board might question that kind of discretionary spending. Then I'll defend it, Ravenna replied. Daniel, 3 months ago you took a massive risk on me. You let someone who'd hurt your daughter become part of your company. If you can take that kind of chance on human potential, I can take a chance on an invention that might change lives. Daniel smiled, the first genuinely warm smile he'd ever given her. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying, Ravenna said. Every single day, I'm trying. That evening, As Ravenna drove home to her modest apartment, she felt something she hadn't experienced in her entire adult life. Pride that wasn't connected to money or status or power. She'd helped someone today, really helped them. And it felt better than any deal she'd ever closed, any profit margin she'd ever exceeded, any empire she'd ever built. But Ravenna had no idea that her decision to help Carlos Rodriguez had just set in motion a chain of events that would bring her face to face with the past she'd been running from her entire life. Because Isabella Rodriguez wasn't just any teenage girl, and the connection between her family and Ravenna's past was about to surface in the most unexpected way. Sometimes redemption requires more than just changing your behavior. Sometimes it requires facing the deepest truths about who you are and where you came from. And Ravenna Ashford's reckoning was just beginning. Do you believe in destiny? Because this ending will restore your faith in justice. 2 months after Carlos Rodriguez began working with Chen Medical Technologies, his neural interface prototype exceeded everyone's expectations. The device worked. Not perfectly, not yet ready for human trials, but the proof of concept was undeniable. Isabella would be among the first test subjects once FDA approval came through. The board of directors called for a celebration, a gala fundraiser to showcase Chen Medical Technologies' innovations and attract additional investors for expansion. It would be held at the Magnolia Grand Hotel, Charlotte's most prestigious venue. Daniel was reluctant. I hate these things. Can't we just send out a press release? You need to show your face, Ravenna insisted. Let people see the human being behind the technology. And Daniel, she paused, this is your moment. You've earned the right to celebrate. The night of the gala, Ravenna arrived early to oversee final preparations. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant but not ostentatious, expensive but not obscenely so. She'd learned that true confidence didn't require designer labels. When Daniel arrived with Emma, Ravenna felt her breath catch. Emma wore a beautiful purple dress, her hair in intricate braids woven with silver ribbons. She looked older than her 7 years, poised and confident. "Miss Ashford!" Emma ran to her, and Ravenna knelt down to eye level, something the old Ravenna never would have done, too worried about wrinkling her designer clothes. "You look like a princess, Emma. Daddy said this is a fancy party where we celebrate helping people. Is that true?" "It's very true. Your daddy's invention is going to save thousands of lives." "Will you sit with us at dinner?" Emma asked. "Daddy says you're part of our team now." Ravenna looked up at Daniel, who nodded. "You've earned your place at this table, Ravenna, literally and figuratively." The evening progressed beautifully. Investors mingled, doctors praised Daniel's innovations, and Carlos Rodriguez was introduced as their newest engineering partner, working on breakthrough neural interface technology. But it was during the formal presentations that everything changed. Isabella Rodriguez, who'd been invited as Carlos's guest, approached the microphone with her father's help. She still used a wheelchair, but her voice was strong and clear. "I want to thank Chen Medical Technologies for believing in my father's vision," Isabella began. "But I also want to thank someone else, someone who taught me that redemption is real and that people can change." She looked directly at Ravenna. 9 months ago, a video went viral of a CEO being cruel to a father and daughter. I watched that video like millions of other people and felt angry at how someone with so much power could be so heartless. But then I watched something else, an interview where that same woman admitted her failures and talked about learning to be better. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone knew exactly what video Isabella meant. When my dad and I walked into Chen Medical Technologies 2 months ago, desperate and scared, we met that woman. And you know what she did? She listened. She believed in us. She used her power to help instead of hurt. She gave my father a chance when everyone else had slammed doors in our faces. Isabella paused, tears streaming down her face. Ravenna Ashford could have had security throw us out, just like she did to Daniel and Emma 9 months ago. But she didn't, because she learned that real strength isn't about having power. It's about using power to lift others up. The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. Ravenna sat frozen, tears running down her cheeks as 300 people rose to their feet. But it was Emma who broke through Ravenna's shock. The 7-year-old climbed out of her chair and walked to Ravenna, taking her hand. "See," Emma whispered, "I told you everyone has good inside them. You just had to remember where you put yours." Denise, after the formal presentations, as guests mingled and celebrated, Ravenna found herself on the hotel's terrace, needing air and space to process everything. Daniel found her there, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. "Quite a night," he said, standing beside her. "I don't deserve this," Ravenna said quietly. "Isabella's praise, the standing ovation, any of it. I was cruel to you and Emma. One good deed doesn't erase that." "No, it doesn't," Daniel agreed. "But 50 good deeds start to. 100 good deeds create a pattern. Ravenna, you've spent 6 months proving that change is real. You've used your business genius to help people instead of exploit them. You've taken chances on people like Carlos that the old Ravenna would have dismissed without a second thought." "I'm terrified I'll slip back," Ravenna admitted. "That the real me, the cruel me, is just hiding, waiting to resurface. You want to know what I think?" Daniel turned to face her fully. "I think the cruel you was the mask, the woman you're becoming now. This is who you actually are when you're not performing for a father who never loved you properly, when you're not trying to prove your worth through net worth, when you're not running from your own fear of being vulnerable." Ravenna felt something break open in her chest. Years of armor, decades of pretending, a lifetime of measuring her value by the wrong metrics. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the second chance, for trusting me with your company, for letting Emma back into my life, for seeing potential in me when all I could see was failure." "Thank you," Daniel countered, "for proving that redemption isn't just a nice story. It's real, it's possible, and it's worth fighting for." Emma appeared on the terrace, followed by Isabella in her wheelchair. The two girls had become friends over the past months, bonding over their father's inventions and their shared belief in second chances. "Are you guys having a serious talk?" Emma asked. "Because the dessert buffet just opened and there's a chocolate fountain and you're missing it." "Priorities, Emma," Daniel laughed. "Always with the priorities. Chocolate is a very important priority, Daddy." As they headed back inside, Emma took Ravenna's hand on one side and her father's on the other. "You know what, Miss Ashford?" "What, sweetheart?" "I'm glad you were mean to us that day at your car place." Ravenna stopped walking, stunned. "Emma, what?" "Because if you hadn't been mean, you wouldn't have learned to be nice. And if you hadn't learned to be nice, you wouldn't have helped Isabella's daddy. And if you hadn't helped Isabella's daddy, she might not get to walk again. So even bad things can turn into good things if people learn from them." 7-year-old wisdom, delivered with complete sincerity and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. "You're absolutely right, Emma," Ravenna said, crouching down to the child's level one more time. "Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for not giving up on me when I didn't deserve your faith." "That's what family does," Emma said simply. "And we're kind of family now, right? Because you work with Daddy, and you help people with us, and you come to my school plays and everything." Family. The word hit Ravenna with unexpected force. She'd spent her whole life chasing success, building empires, accumulating wealth, all because she'd never felt like she belonged anywhere, never felt truly valued for who she was rather than what she achieved. And now, in the ruins of her old life, she'd found something her millions never bought her, a place where she belonged, people who valued her growth over her net worth, and a purpose bigger than her own ambition. 3 months later, Carlos Rodriguez's neural interface device received FDA approval for human trials. Isabella was the first participant. The device worked beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Within 6 weeks, Isabella took her first steps in 3 years. Chen Medical Technologies' valuation reached $500 million. Daniel owned 40%. Ravenna, as COO, now held 5% equity, $25 million on paper, more money than she'd ever need. But the number that mattered more to Ravenna was different. 12 families helped through the Rodriguez Family Foundation she'd established, providing funding for inventors from underprivileged backgrounds to develop medical innovations. On a Saturday afternoon in June, exactly 1 year after the viral video that destroyed her empire, Ravenna stood outside Ashford Luxury Motors. The dealership had new ownership now, sold to a corporation that specialized in inclusive luxury sales. The new management had reached out to Ravenna for advice on ethical business practices. But today, she wasn't here as a consultant. She was here with Daniel and Emma, keeping a promise. "You ready?" Daniel asked, Emma bouncing excitedly beside them. "I'm ready," Ravenna said. They walked into the showroom together. The champagne Maybach was gone, but there was a beautiful silver Mercedes S-Class positioned center stage, gleaming under the lights. "That one, Daddy!" Emma exclaimed. "That's the one?" Daniel smiled. "You sure, Princess? You don't want to look around first?" "I'm sure. It's perfect." The sale took 30 minutes. Daniel paid cash, $127,000 from the checking account of a man who'd once been humiliated for looking poor in this very building. But before they drove away, Emma had one more request. "Can we give Ms. Ashford a ride home in our new car, please?" "I have my own car, sweetheart," Ravenna said gently. "I know, but it's important. Trust me." So Ravenna found herself in the back seat of the Mercedes, Emma beside her chattering about everything and nothing, while Daniel drove through Charlotte's streets. When they pulled up to Ravenna's apartment building, modest but comfortable, in a neighborhood filled with families and actual life, Emma turned to her seriously. "Ms. Ashford, this is where you live now, right? After you lost all your money." "Emma," Daniel started, but Ravenna touched his shoulder. "It's okay." "Yes, Emma, this is where I live now. It's not fancy, but it's home." "Good," Emma said firmly, "because now when you look out your window every morning, you won't see stuff. You'll see people. And that's way better." Ravenna looked at this remarkable child who taught her more about life in 1 year than she'd learned in 27 years before. "You're absolutely right, Emma. People are way better than stuff." As she got out of the car, Emma called through the window, "Miss Ashford, next week is my 8th birthday party. You have to come. Daddy's making his special chocolate cake and everything. I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." Watching the silver Mercedes drive away, Ravenna thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd lost an empire, lost her CEO title, lost most of her fortune. But she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. She'd found her humanity again. The viral video that destroyed her career now had a sequel, multiple news segments about her redemption, her work at Chen Medical Technologies, and her foundation helping underprivileged inventors. The comments were different now. This is what real growth looks like. She fell from grace, but climbed back up as a better person. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters. But the comment that mattered most to Ravenna was simpler. "My daughter was treated badly at that dealership years ago. Today, Ms. Ashford personally called to apologize and offered to cover my daughter's college tuition through her foundation. Real change is possible." That evening, in her modest apartment with its normal furniture and reasonable rent, Ravenna pulled out a framed photo from her desk drawer. It was from Emma's school play 2 months ago. Daniel, Emma, Ravenna, Carlos and Isabella, all together, all smiling, all family in the way that mattered. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "Don't forget next week. And Ms. Ashford, I'm really proud of you." Ravenna typed back, "I'm proud of me too, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me." She set down her phone and walked to her window, looking out at the neighborhood filled with people living their real, imperfect, beautiful lives. Families having barbecues, kids playing in yards, normal people doing normal things, finding joy in connection rather than accumulation. 1 year ago, Ravenna Ashford had been a CEO worth $890 million, living in a penthouse, wearing designer clothes and feeling empty. Today, she was a COO making $200,000 a year, living in a modest apartment, shopping at Target, and feeling full. Sometimes, losing everything is the greatest gift life can give you. Because only when you have nothing left can you finally discover who you are beneath all the things you thought defined you. And Ravenna Ashford had finally found herself. Not the cruel CEO building empires on ice and arrogance, not the broken woman destroyed by viral shame, but something entirely new, a person who chose kindness over cruelty, connection over conquest, and love over luxury. A person who understood that the truest measure of success wasn't how much you accumulated, but how many lives you touched. A person who'd learned, through the bravery of a 7-year-old girl with a $20 bill, that everyone has good inside them, even people who forgot how to show it. Especially people who forgot how to show it. Because sometimes, those are the people who, once they remember, shine brightest of all.